Really excited about today's episode. But first, if you don't know my voice, I'm Wes Goldberg. In case you missed the announcement, I'm officially taking over Real GM Radio for Danny LaRue. And if you don't know me, I've been covering the NBA for a decade for places like The Ringer, Miami Herald, San Jose Mercury News, Bleacher Report, Real GM, and others. I've also been podcasting about the NBA since 2014. I currently live in Miami, where I watch a ton of basketball and cover Heat games at the arena down the street from where I live downtown. I don't want to change that much about the show that you already love and that you're already coming to, but it is going to naturally be a little bit different with me taking over. I'm not really sure how yet, but my goal here is to cut through some of the noise, provide compelling and accessible conversations with some of my friends and colleagues in the media space, and be a partner for you throughout the NBA season. Also, one way the show is definitely changing right away. We are now on YouTube, so go check out the show. Make sure you subscribe over there. So big thanks to Danny, Real GM, and everybody behind the scenes for the opportunity. My first guest is Ben Golliver. He's the national NBA reporter for the Washington Post. You can hear him on the GOAT podcast. I know he's been on with Danny before, so he's probably already familiar to you a little bit. He's a must read and a must listen if you don't know. And he's joining me to talk about identity changers, new faces in new places that are going to change the way their teams play or how a certain unit functions this season. It's a fun conversation. Let's jump in. All right, really excited to be joined by my friend Ben Golliver for my maiden voyage as the new host of Real GM Radio. I couldn't think of anybody better to join me on my first show than Ben. He covers the NBA for the Washington Post. You can hear him on the GOAT podcast. He's one of the best out there, Ben. Thanks so much for joining me, man. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you too. We have one goal here, and that's to avoid grand opening, grand closing, Wes. All right. We want this to be a nice, long running stint for you. We want this to be an era, a reign. So, congratulations to the new show. I will try not to screw it up.
Appreciate that. Yeah, just don't want to be like last one hired, first one fired. That's what we're trying to avoid here. Look, we're talking about identity changers today, new faces in new places who are going to change the way that a team plays or how a specific unit functions, basically like how we experience watching those teams. So it's not really a list of best offseason acquisitions, although some of this stuff can overlap, obviously. But let's just jump right in. I want to start with Klay Thompson on the Dallas Mavericks. I think he's going to change a lot for them. We don't know if he's going to start or if he's going to come off the bench or whatever, but Ben, the Mavs were super reliant on corner threes last year. No team took a greater percentage of their shots from the corners than Dallas. They shot less than 30% on above the break threes in the finals, a big reason why they couldn't make enough threes in the final series against the Celtics. So I think adding Klay is going to give them somebody who can make above the break threes at a high rate. He took 51% of his shots from above the break last year, made 39% of them. Luka and Kyrie are going to have a lot more of the floor to work with as passers, especially Luka. So I think he could change a lot of how this offense looks. And it's not going to be so much like paint by numbers. Luka drives, kicks to the corner to PJ Washington, and rinse and repeat. You know what I mean? So I think Klay is going to really change how we see this team operate.
Well, it's interesting because I could see some of the rinse and repeat with Klay. Klay is at a different stage of his career than maybe he was a couple of years ago. I no longer view him in that big time two-way wing mold. I almost am thinking about him as like kind of a stretch four for these guys. And, a few years ago, I think when there was a little bit less parity, he's the guy who you would maybe worry about getting picked on defensively if you get into a playoff series with a super loaded opponent. But I think what we saw in the last couple of years of the playoffs, you can kind of have a weak link here or there as long as they're making it up on the other end and as long as your team chemistry is good and as long as they're supporting your best players, right? And so I think the best case scenario for Dallas is he does plug into that catch and shoot role, super high volume, just wait for Luka to, zing you one of those passes across court and just cash it out at a higher rate than some of these guys were doing at various points of the playoffs. I think he's capable of doing that. It's funny because I didn't really love the Kyrie Irving move for Dallas when they did it. It's like, oh, it's a little bit too late in his career. Maybe it's a little bit too much money. I think that they're feeling justified on that move because of the payoff of making the finals and, really trying to maximize Luka's prime. It's the same formula here, right? It's like Klay, well, you would have much rather had him in 2018, right? Like this is a very different player. But if you have a very specific skill set that you need to fill, and that was their undoing, right? I mean, they lost the finals because of their offense, not their defense. For years, it was their defense that was the weaker side of the basketball, and it was really their offense kind of falling apart around their star guards and Kyrie not really being ready for prime time there at TD Garden that cost them that series. So Can Klay help boost that, or can maybe he help a little bit of the natural regression we might expect from a team like this when they're good but not elite? And maybe you're worried about them coming back to earth a little bit next season. I think he should help. The price would have made me a little bit queasy, but I get why they did it because they're under the clock, with Luka. They have to put as much talent around him as possible. And I think that they were able to accomplish that goal this summer. So I think it's fair to call him an identity changer, but I don't think it's going to look all that different, in my opinion.
Well, I'm with you on the Kyrie trade when it first happened. I was like, really? Like, this is what we want to do. We want to take the ball out of Luka's hands a little bit more and make Kyrie do stuff at a worse clip than Luka's going to do it. And then it added this level of unpredictability to Dallas's offense, which ended up being really important. And we saw like Kyrie takes these crazy shots from these crazy angles on all different parts of the floor. And it just changed up the rhythm of what they do. They push the pace a little bit more. And I do think with Klay, he is definitely more of a catch and shoot guy now. He's not the two-way guy he once was. You could even argue identity changer maybe for the worse defensively, right? Where it's just like, oh my God, we're always scrambling all the time. But I like his ability to move off the ball is unlike anybody else on this roster previously with the Mavericks. And it is a little bit more unpredictable, at least in terms of where those shots are going to come from. If Klay is going to continue to do the stuff that he used to do in Golden State, which I'm not really sure you're going to be able to take that out of his system. He's one of the best off-ball movers in the league, at least from beyond the arc. And so I like that for them in that way.
Well, they just need weapons. I mean, you look at the best teams in the league. I mean, Boston, high volume threes. What was the stat? They had like 8 guys who made 100 threes or something like that. Right. Oklahoma City, every single one of those guys is going to be jacking it. When you're looking at the top tier contenders this year, it's who can get up the most 3-point shots. Dallas needs some people better than they had at those 3 and 4 spots last year, and I think Klay fits that bill. That's why, I do think it's an expensive fit. It's a little bit of a gamble. It could go sideways, depending on how does he adjust to not playing in Golden State for the first time. How does he adjust to really being a role player, like a clear-cut role player on this group where there's guys who are going to have the ball in their hands a lot. It's funny you mentioned with Kyrie showing up. Oh, it's going to take the ball out of Luka's hands. Sort of. It also just put the ball in Kyrie's hands when Luka wasn't on the court. It's like Luka still has the ball an awful lot. And that's going to be a big change for Klay Thompson, a big adjustment. That ball zipping around for Golden State with Steph Curry being so unwilling to give it up so he can get it back. It's not really how Luka plays. And so I think that's one thing that Klay is going to have to work on in this new chapter.
This show isn't really about this, but I got to ask you anyway, since I'm talking to you. But do you think he should start? Do you think the Mavericks should start him? Do you think they should bring him off the bench in sort of that Ray Allen, Miami Heat era type of role?
I would, just to start the season out of respect and see how it goes.
I would
give him the shot. I don't think you want to give him all this money, pitch him on leave Golden State, the only home you've ever known for a fresh start. He already has to leave California for Texas. No disrespect, but as someone who lives in California, I would call that a little bit of a downgrade. Things got really hairy there at Dallas during the playoffs. We had tornadoes. We had all sorts of canceled flights. I mean, it was just a wild show during the postseason from a weather standpoint. A little bit different than getting to ride your boat.
Yeah, give up
Bay,
your boat in the San Francisco Bay. Come to Dallas, where I think we have a lake, but not really. It's about it.
So he's already got enough to adjust to. I would let him start and just see how it looks. And if he loses the spot like he kind of did last year, so be it. I think he'll understand that. He's been through it once. But one thing we know about Klay, the pride was the word that everybody was bringing up. Bob Myers on TV over and over again. Seemed like his teammates were referencing Klay's pride. I don't think you want a guy with wounded pride and a chip on his shoulder to feel like he's backing up somebody who's got no stripes in the league. I think you got to get him out there.
I could see him doing the thing that Westbrook did when he first got to the Clippers, where they started him for a game or two, and then he was like, no, Ty Lue, I've got this. I'm going to go to the bench, when it was so obvious that he had to go to the bench, and you don't buy it either, right?
I'm so sick of those stories, Wes.
So, that's how they're going to do it. That's the PR spin.
Himself. Yeah, no, come on, have more pride than that, Klay Thompson. Don't bench yourself, all right?
Don't bench yourself. Yeah, let the coach do
fall on that sword for you. Come on now.
Let's go to the next one. Have not talked to you about this, and this is maybe one of the more polarizing deals from the summer. Josh Giddey to the Chicago Bulls, swapping him out for Alex Caruso. I have this as an identity changer just because it's going to change a lot, I think, of how the Bulls are going to play. They were 28th in pace last year. Oklahoma City would have ranked second in pace in the minutes that Josh Giddey was on the floor. So the way that the Bulls played last year, the way that Giddey tends to play, completely different. We even saw a little bit of that with Australia during the Olympics. So Caruso out, Giddey in. That gives Chicago sort of that quick twitch decision maker. You can help Kobe White play off the ball a little bit more. We don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but it probably will happen. Gives them more positional size, a little bit like what they had with Lonzo Ball, which is the way I read this was, how often did we hear the Bulls talk about, oh, well, when we had Lonzo, we were this and this and that. This might be them trying to recreate a little bit of that Lonzo Ball magic here. Again, I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad. I don't know if it's going to work, but I do know it's going to probably change quite a bit of how they play.
Well, and also how good they are, right? Because I think you have to lump this trade also in with DeRozan leaving. Because didn't he make a comment about like, well, once I saw the writing on the wall with that trade, it was like, all right, time to, explore my options and land elsewhere. So it's a big step back in the standings when you're taking out those veteran talents and you're asking Josh Giddey to be the savior. I'm glad you mentioned the Australia stuff because there was some real moments of genius for Josh Giddey. Now, the consistency factor is what worries you because he looks amazing one night. Or even one quarter, and then no shows the next one. And it didn't really feel like he was excelling at driving game after game after game after game, like putting his imprint on every single contest. And that's, I think, what you want to see if you're the Bulls. You want to see, can this guy do that? Or is he just sort of a lark? Like every third game, he gives you this amazing performance and, these great behind the back passes and he hits a couple shots. He looks awesome. And I think this is a great place for him to just kind of take the training wheels off, which it definitely were on in Oklahoma City, and take a shot. I think bigger picture, the identity change is they're tanking, right? And this is the year to tank. I couldn't be higher on Cooper Flagg. I had my druthers. I probably wouldn't send him to the Chicago Bulls, right? But this is an organization whose entire identity has been intentional mediocrity. Now they're not going to be good enough to do that. Now they're definitely going to be sub-mediocre. And it's kind of the countdown to like, when can you get rid of Zach LaVine as sort of the next thing, on their bucket list or checklist. But I'd rather be in the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes than trying to fight for the 11th seed again. So from that standpoint, it's a no-brainer to do this.
Yeah, it's a great call in terms of like sort of the macro identity change because you could put the Bulls in there. You could put the Brooklyn Nets in there. When they made their deal, reacquired their own picks, like, oh, we're tanking with our own picks now. Congratulations. Like you could put a couple of these like tanking teams in that conversation.
If you were a GM, would you time your tank when there's like a super hyped prospect coming in? Like obviously you're going to do it for a Wembanyama, right?
Right.
But like, remember how everybody was tanking for Anthony Davis and then Zion comes along. That's a super hype draft. I feel like Cooper's already got the juice right now, It's like, do you think that factors into their minds at all? Because, sometimes these GMs have to worry about self-preservation. Like if you were Sean Marks or you were Arturis in Chicago, it's like, well, we haven't wanted to pull the plug for a couple years here, but our fans are going to be obsessed with Cooper. So why not? Like we were giving them what they want as a shot at this ticket, right?
You've got to have like that buy-in from ownership where you're going to keep your job because it sounds like obviously you would just tank for Wemby or Cooper Flagg or Zion or whoever, but like the number one job of a GM isn't to get the team better. The number one job is to keep the job. And so it's like, okay, if we tank and we win,
come on now.
Right. If we win 10 games, am I going to be the guy even making this pick in a few months? So I don't know. You could also do what the Washington Wizards did and just pick an awful draft and tank that year too. But
they're picking every draft. Don't worry about that.
That's true.
They'll be here next year. They're going to be here the year after that. It's going to take a lot of work for them to not be in this conversation.
Charles Lee. He's my next identity changer. New Hornets coach. This is another pace thing. Like the Hornets ranked 22nd in pace last season under Steve Clifford. Charles Lee's out here in the media already talking about how he wants to push the pace, all these things. And what I like about this, I'm not saying I'm buying like Hornet stock here, but it's really the first time in a while that LaMelo Ball has had a coach who kind of wants to play the way LaMelo Ball wants to play, at least from what we're hearing, at least from what Charles Lee is saying. And if those two are kind of on the same page, maybe they do take a little bit more of a leap in the standings, right? The last time LaMelo, obviously LaMelo's got to be healthy. That's the biggest part of this. But the last time he was healthy and good, the Hornets won 43 games, which isn't amazing. They were like 10th in the East, I think, that year, but a lot better than what they've been the last few years. And I think they're definitely making a move towards playing faster, more full court stuff. Drafting Tijan Salon was like a big sort of, okay, yep, we could tell you want to play faster. So I think they're going to look a lot different on the court.
Yeah, I just from an identity change standpoint, I hope that Charles Lee's like an orthopedic surgeon, just in case the LaMelo ankle thing keeps going. He could just handle that one himself. He's gonna have a couple different jobs, side hustles to kind of get his best player on the court. It was interesting. LeVar Ball has been talking like, oh, the Hornets should trade LaMelo. I mean, obviously that's taken for a grain of salt, but it does feel like the clock is ticking on this partnership, right? Because when you're
Yeah.
saying identity change for the Hornets, I was curious, like, what has the Hornets' identity been, right? I would say irrelevant, off the radar, backwards in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
We're still recovering from the Michael Jordan era. I think sometimes we focus a lot on the lame duck coaching year, right? Like the coaches last year before he's probably going to get fired. I think the first year for new owners is tricky too because they come in and they just want to evaluate. We're going to evaluate everything. We're not going to make any changes. We're just going to think and we're going to cut costs and we're going to just like look at how this runs. Well, you're wasting a year of everybody's life. Like all those
Right.
players are like, well, I'm not here to evaluate. I'm here to play and win games, right? I'm here to make some money. And so that's a bit a tough spot for them to be in. I like the coaching hire a lot. I do think it helps them modernize. It helps give them a better identity where there isn't the clash of personality between like an old school guy like Steve Clifford and LaMelo. It's just like a very clear, you're giving the car keys to LaMelo. Now, the scary thing there is we see
Mario
him
Kart
pulling
keys.
out of the arena, like
Right.
he's going like 75 miles an hour out of the player's garage running through red lights on these videos. So maybe we don't necessarily want him to have unfettered access to the car keys. But they've got a lot of young talent. The interesting thing to me is with Brandon Miller, like how fast does he want to play, right?
Right.
Incredibly athletic guy, great, shot creator off the dribble, really interesting long-term prospect. But Paul George has never really loved playing up and down, right? Like there's a little bit more pace in terms of the half
Right.
court of how he operates. So let's see if those two main guys fit together in this fast-paced environment, right? And then let's adjust as we go through this season. But great hire for them. I mean, they could have done a lot worse. This guy's been, I think regarded as one of the top assistant coaches for years, coming from winning programs. If he can't create a better identity in Charlotte, nobody can.
Today's episode of Real GM Radio is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. You want to play Prize Picks alongside Drewski, Joe Budden, MMA champion Sugar Sean O'Malley? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game.
If he can't create a better identity in Charlotte, nobody can.
Right, and that's sort of the best case scenario is that he is sort of the Rick Carlisle to their Indiana Pacers, and he can kind of him and Tyrese Halliburton, Carlisle and Halliburton got on the same page, and look at what the Pacers were able to do. They're one of the biggest reasons why the Pacers were good last year was because they were able to kind of put their identity on every single game that they were playing. And like you already said, Charles Lee was one of the top assistants in the league. He had other job opportunities. He obviously looked at the Hornets and what this roster had, whether it's Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, whatever opportunity was there, and said, yeah, I think there's something here that this is a nut that hasn't been cracked, and I think I'm the one to crack it. So it'll be interesting to see if he was right.
Well, and don't forget, when you're going for your first job, what you care about a lot is job security and patience, right? And no pressure and no expectations. And that's the flip side of how bad the Hornets have been these last few years, is that he gets to enjoy all of those things, right? If it doesn't work out and they do have to trade LaMelo in a year or two, Charles Lee's still going to be the coach. You know what I mean? They're not going to just bail on him after one season. So I think it's a pretty, it's not a great coaching opportunity, right? Like there's a reason why some other guys like backed out, Kenny Atkinson at one point. Like it's a tough job. But if you're an aggressive, stealth starting guy who wants a long leash and like wants to have a chance to really make an impact to change a culture, this is the place for you. So that's why it makes sense. And I'm glad you put him on the list. That was a very creative nomination by you, Wes.
Well, I got two more coaches that I want to bring on the list. I got some point guards that I want to talk about. Let's go to the next coach. I couldn't figure out if this guy deserved to be on the list or not. So I'm kind of like open floor this thing. JJ Redick, Lakers coach. I feel like the Lakers want him to be on this list. Like they really want him to be an identity changer, but like there's a talk about, can he get the Lakers to shoot more threes? Can he play a better style of offense? All these things. But my question to you, Ben, is there anything, or I guess there's something, but is there only so much that a coach can do to change the identity of a LeBron-led team? Or as long as LeBron is on that team, it's always going to look like a LeBron-led team, and there's not going to be a whole lot more bells and whistles beyond that?
Well, should we reserve judgment until we get our hands on JJ Redick's analytics app, teaching app for the players that he's been hyping up? I mean, maybe we could really see how forward thinking is once we get a chance to play around with the new app on our iPhones. I kid.
It's just a notes app. It's just like
I think the argument here for coaches can't be identity changers on LeBron's teams would be David Blatt to Tyronn Lue, right? I mean,
Yeah.
how clear does that get? I mean, we go from the fighter pilot to the NBA champion, and it was night and day. It's more about vibes than I think it is about basketball strategy, although there was some moments where LeBron really chafed with Blatt's basketball stuff, too, most famously kind of trashing his play call at the end of that Bulls game and hitting the game winner in the playoffs. So I think it's possible. It could look different. The kinds of things that JJ Redick is highlighting, though, we got to ask, is it going to be possible with the Lakers roster? I'm not sure LeBron's the question. I think we kind of know what we're getting from LeBron, we're getting from AD. The question is, like, if you want to be this team that jacks a lot of three-pointers and takes the ball out of LeBron's hands, do you have people that LeBron's going to trust to be a ball handler? And do you have people to stick open shots? It was a big problem for the Lakers last year, right? It's every time they go down in the playoffs, they're getting outgunned. And so did they address that? Is Bronny the identity changer? He's just going to be, like a young Klay Thompson there, catching all these laser passes from his dad and knocking down three-pointers? Probably not. I don't really see that being the case. So
neither is Dalton Connect. He kind of struggled in summer league a little bit, and that's, if you're asking the rookie to be that guy, that's a lot from a rookie.
Well, in his defense, I think he's more likely to have success as a very narrow role player next to LeBron, as opposed to like, hey, go out there and be the guy in Vegas. But yeah, I mean, he should have looked a lot better in Vegas because he's older than everybody out there, right? So it was a little bit of a disappointing summer league from him. I think this really boils down to, if you didn't really make major changes to the roster, but you did change the coach, and you're just hoping to kind of like get marginal wins around the edges because you have better strategy. You're more prepared. Maybe you're making better use of timeouts. All the things that Lakers fans would complain about with Darvin Ham, that might bump you up one or two spots in the standings. It's not going to overhaul your identity. It's not going to boost you up into like the championship contender conversation. And I think there's a very good likelihood the Lakers are right back in the pack for the play-in tournament, because they had really good help from their main guys last year. They can't count on that again this year, given their age and injury history.
Yeah, maybe if there's any identity shift with the Lakers, and this might sound crazy, it's that they're even more Hollywood than they were last year.
Oh yeah,
because now you got like the suave JJ Redick. I am so excited about his media sessions, or I'm not. I'm not sure. They're gonna go one way or the other.
You should be.
And they're gonna be different than the Darvin Ham media session. So you're gonna have that. You're gonna have the Bronny and his dad storyline. This whole thing. I just feel like this whole Lakers season is almost more documentary than trying to win basketball games. And maybe that's what it is, and that's fine from an entertainment perspective. I don't know if that's what you want from a Lakers fan, but
look, Wes, when I was coming in the NBA, they used to sell you're selling wins or you're selling hope. That was the thing, and that's no longer the thing. You're selling wins, you're selling hope, or you're selling clicks. But you got three categories to choose from, and I think that you've kind of hit the nail on the head. The Lakers are selling clicks. LeBron had a chance this summer if he wanted to shake up his career, if he wanted to go chase a fifth ring, if he really wanted to get in the mix and try to push Mike on the rings conversation. He could have left the Lakers. He could have orchestrated something. Didn't seem like he gave any serious thought to it. The amount of fun he had winning gold with the Dream Team in the summer, and it kind of felt like he came out of that saying, well, it's just nice to win something, right? It was a very similar vibe, obviously a much higher level, but it felt a little bit like the the in-season tournament last year, where it's like, man, it's just nice to just win something. Like, I just want to pound the Pelicans, right? You just want to pound these teams to show that he could still do it on a short-term basis because it hasn't happened in the playoffs. And so, that's why I think he's kind of knows the deal. Like, I think that they're trying to be a show. It's always going to be showtime with the Lakers. It's going to be a new threat here in Los Angeles because the Clippers got their new building. They're probably going to get a little buzz from that. We'll see how that shakes out. I think the Lakers obviously are still going to be on top in a big way when it comes to attention and all that kind of stuff too. So, they've got their work cut out for them this season. But I think LeBron's entering it happy because he gets to play with his son, right? He's entering it happy because he gets his coach. And I think in terms of JJ and the media, the question is, does he have two personalities if it's going well versus if it's going poorly, right? Because it feels like JJ is a little chippy, and if they're on a 3-game losing streak, you ask the wrong question, maybe the wrong tone, maybe the wrong implication. Does he lose it? Like, is there a firecracker tendency? And it felt like JJ, the broadcaster, was doing everything he could to be decaffeinated, right? Like, he really kind of sucked a lot of his personality out of it, which I didn't love. I kind of like it when JJ is really ramped up, but I get it for an ABC broadcast. A lot of people are watching. You got to kind of try to appeal to everybody, right? Will he be that same decaffeinated version if they've lost 5 of 6 and LeBron's out with an ankle and he's looking around trying to, D'Angelo Russell? I got to trust D'Angelo Russell to run this thing. Let's see how he acts in that situation.
And he's asked maybe the question like in the wrong tone, and then you kind of get I've played in the NBA for this many years, and I'm the coach. And what do you know about basketball? Kind of answer. Yeah. Like I already see it happening. All right, another coach.
The Duke grad in him.
The Duke grad, yeah. These Dukies, man, they're kind of the same. I do have one coach who I'm absolutely certain is going to change the identity of his new team. That's Mike Budenholzer, new Suns coach, taking over for Frank Vogel. He's going to implement an offensive system that is going to be very different than sort of the Frank Vogel, hey, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, ISO heavy, do your thing. Like, this is the guy, Budenholzer, who tapes squares on the Bucks practice court for his players to stand in. Giannis is going to go to the middle. He's going to spray out to there. I don't know if it's going to be the same system in Phoenix because obviously it's very different personnel, but he's going to have a system, right? The thing about Budenholzer, for better or worse, is he's very rigid, especially offensively. And if he implements that rigidness into the Phoenix Suns system, then they're going to just look a lot different. And I do think it'll be better for them in the regular season for what it's worth, but it's definitely going to look different.
I have no idea what to expect with the Suns. I said that last year too, and I think I was proven correct. I mean, the only time I had a good beat on the Suns was after they went down 2-0 in the playoffs, and I was like, these guys are getting swept. I had to make sure I went out there for Game 4 just to watch it in person. I mean, what an utter meltdown that was in terms of a team feeling like they were going to be in the contender conversation and just crashing and burning. It winds up costing Vogel his job. The stereotype of Budenholzer, like you're saying, is like this kind of control freak, red in the face, wound really tight. I don't know if you saw his introductory press conference. This guy was like all suntan. I mean, he looked like a different guy.
Yeah, like, tears in his eyes. Yeah.
So I love this idea of like mid-career, midlife crisis Budenholzer coming back. He like learns how to
midlife Mike.
Yeah, he shows up in like a red Porsche drop top. It's like, hey guys, just here with the kids. Not sure that's going to take place. I think he's going to get himself locked back in, and that's where I worry because Vogel was a little bit of a disciplinarian as well. Like he had high standards on defense that his team could not live up to, and they just started to tune him out because it was like he's just screaming about stuff that they did not want to do or they were not capable of doing. And a lot of those same weak pieces are coming back, right? It's like Nurkic. Good luck fashioning a great defense around Nurkic, and the other bigs they have behind him are just tough. So, Kevin's going to have to manage his energy during the course of the season. Beal, never on the court. I've taken to calling him down badly because it's just like he's never, he's never out there, not reliable. You never know. Is he going to give you multiple months? How many turnovers and mistakes did he have in the postseason? It's just like such a mess. So they have a lot of questions. And the one thing coming out of the Olympics that made me laugh was everybody saying like, I love this version of Devin Booker. Like, too bad he can't play like this with the Suns. Well, yeah, you only need 3 more Hall of Famers to have Devin Booker be able to play a perfectly fitting narrow role. Like, he has to do everything for the Suns because he's like kind of been their de facto point guard. And when he hasn't been, he still had to be their lead creator because Beal and whoever else hasn't been able to do it. I like the Tyus Jones move for them. I bet you Budenholzer likes that as well because it's a nice little control element. Somebody who could be trustworthy, gives you a little bit more structure. I think a little bit clearer role identity. It takes some of the reliance off of Beal because you have another professional guy out there who could fill minutes. But I think there's a real good chance that even with the coaching change, they wind up almost back right where they were. And
Yeah.
I don't see them making a deep run, unfortunately. And I would love to see it for Kevin because, more than anything, I'd love him to have another chapter. And it's so cool that he gets to get the gold medal. But everybody's talking about Steph. Everybody's talking about LeBron. People kind of forget about Kevin, right? And he hasn't had the success since leaving Golden State, obviously. It would be great to see him in a Western Conference Finals on that kind of stage. I just don't think the Suns are constructed well enough to get them there. And I don't think Budenholzer's like the magic coach who's going to do it.
The one thing I do like about Budenholzer is he is sort of like inverse Frank Vogel. He's the disciplinarian on offense. Frank Vogel's the disciplinarian on defense. And yeah, this team is never going to be good defensively. I don't care who you had, but John Wooden is the coach. It wasn't going to matter. They're not going to be a good defensive team. So might as well just be good on offense. And now that's probably not going to be good enough to win a championship, but it'll be better than what they have. But yeah, it'll be more fun. It'll be better vibes. Like, yeah, there's all that. I also had Tyus Jones and Monty Morris on my list too. This one's obvious. They go from no point guards to two of them. Both of them great assist to turnover ratio guys, especially Tyus Jones. He's obviously the standout there. But Suns 25th in turnover rate last year. Way too many empty possessions. You meant like Bradley Beal dribbling that off his foot. Kevin Durant not knowing where the ball is going to be. Those guys are going to help. They are going to make them smaller potentially, especially if they're on the court with Durant, Beal, and Booker all at the same time. But maybe that doesn't matter if you're just saying, well, we're just going to lean into our offense. My big question with Tyus Jones and Monty Morris, they were already small, and they're going to potentially be even smaller. But my question with those guys is, all right, you signed these two veteran point guards on a minimum. Like they're going to get Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal and Devin Booker to play in a system. It's like, are we sure? Are we sure 3 Hall of Fame guys, maybe 2.5? I don't know what to make of Beal. 3 former All-Stars are going to listen to the guys on the minimum contracts who signed late in the offseason? Like, I don't know. We could still see a bunch of long-range twos and isolation stuff because those guys at the end of the day can just do whatever they want.
Correct. But I do think that those guys were pleading for structure that never came last year. I think that they wanted the point guard, so I think they're going to be respectful. I think, though, with Kevin and Devin, those guys are going to take whatever shots they want, and they have their sweet spots. Their long twos are not bad shots, right? And so I think the argument for the Suns' optimism would be more structure on offense, better vibes because the coach is more in tune with how the stars want to play on offense. Beal can't play worse. So if Beal has a bounce-back season, everything changes.
Great point.
And then, you've still got a lot of firepower. It's that same big three model that you were trying to talk yourself into last year. I'm not buying it. I just don't think it's sustainable. I think even if things are going well, there's going to be a month where somebody gets injured and then kind of the wheels fall off. It reminds me a lot of the big three Brooklyn Nets, where it's like it looks pretty good on paper and it's just not that way in reality. And so I kind of just feel like they're going to be in that 6 to 7 seed mix. And, when you're spending all that money, that's better than being out of the playoffs, right? Like they want to have some level of return. I'm sure they'd want to win a series this year. The dream would be to make the conference finals. I just don't think it's going to be happen. There's better, younger, deeper, hungrier teams in the Western Conference. But they're going to matter. And, it's a big key first step. You've got to be relevant. And, there was a danger there when Chris Paul was getting old and Monty Williams wasn't really getting through to people. And you had to think about, Ayton is going to be our franchise guy. Good God. Ask the Portland Trailblazers. How's that going? There was a danger there for Phoenix that they were going to get irrelevant and Booker was already going to be gone. And they staved that off with these moves. So that's at least something, even though it's come at this astronomical cost.
Yeah, it's kind of like you went from driving a Toyota Prius on your commute to work, and it's just like a 10-mile, 20-minute commute or whatever it is, and you're just stuck in traffic the whole time anyway, and you just swap that out for like a Corvette that you can never really rev up. Like it looks different for you. It's kind of like a different vehicle, but you're still going to the same place in the same amount of time. So that's kind of what the Phoenix Suns might end up being.
If you want to make a memory, you got to go to Game Time. All right. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you all the incredible deals and the great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of seats. You've got the super deal. Don't forget about the super deal. And curated deals. They make it easier to find the best price on great seats. And I think this is so cool is when you click on the ticket, right? You go to the app, if you want to go to a game in Boston, you want to go to a game in New York or Philadelphia, whatever, you go to the city and you click on the game you want to go to, and then they just show you a great, easy to read layout of the stadium. And then you click on the seat you want, and then you get a view of the seat right from there. Boom. You know what you're buying. So you get seat views before you buy, and they have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation, protection, job loss. It's terrific. So toggling here with the Game Time app. Now this feature shows the total upfront, no surprise fees at checkout, so you know what you're dealing with. You don't click on the button after and you go, wait a minute, what's that extra $20 for? Also, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference for the lowest price guarantee. They have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you up to 100% of the difference. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
Couple more point guards for you. Russell Westbrook on the Denver Nuggets. Don't know if this is going to work out, but it is going to give the Nuggets second unit a new look. That's for sure. Trusted veteran ball handler, lead that second unit. He's going to give them, at least the way I read this, the kind of pace and physicality they haven't really had since they lost Bruce Brown. Adding Dario Saric was a nice addition too. So Calvin Booth, obviously the GM there, succumbing to Michael Malone's wish for more veterans. So it looks like this bench unit is going to be built around Westbrook and Saric, again, for better or for worse. But it is going to look a lot different. And I think Westbrook is going to be sort of that new sort of engine for that offense, especially when probably Jokic is off the floor.
So I don't know if your experience with Nuggets fans has been like, oh, we don't get talked about enough. Everybody forgets us. Have you gotten that vibe from their fan base?
Oh, yeah.
I just want them to understand that there's two sides to that, which is when you have disastrous off seasons back to back and you're bleeding talent and wasting Nikola Jokic's prime, you get the benefit of nobody caring about you, because if the Celtics or the Lakers or another big market prestige franchise had approached the last two off seasons in the smack dab in the middle of a three-time MVP's prime, they would be getting crushed 24/7, 365
Yes.
by every media outlet for letting all of that talent go. You can't pay Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. You
Unreal.
can't find a way to keep that guy who is absolutely crucial to your championship team. You're just going to let him walk. You're going to try to like fill in the gaps with your young draft picks, none of whom have hit basically over these last couple of years. How was Peyton Watson in the playoffs? I must have blinked and missed. You know, I don't know like, how'd that go. Like Christian Brown, incredible. I mean, he took down your Miami Heat down there in South Florida, Wes, but he had a couple of great games in that finals. But asking him to step up last year, that didn't really work out, right?
Nope.
Westbrook, to me, if you're banking anything on Westbrook, and even just hearing you try to say, here's what the vision of it is, it was grinding my gears, man. Come on. This is Nikola Jokic. He's trying to get his second ring. He's trying to get stamped like Hakeem Olajuwon. You cannot entrust this guy's prime to freaking Russell Westbrook at age 35 or whatever it is, coming off of, multiple seasons where it's just very, very erratic. And I'm not saying he didn't help the Clippers at times. In terms of identity, that is his core strength. He's going to bring energy, right? But it's sort of boundless energy that goes in every direction. That's not always helpful. And he's a tough player to play with. He's a tough player to build lineups around. And he's a very, very, very tough player to trust in the playoffs. And that's what it all boils down to. I want the Nuggets to go out there and get playoff contributors, playoff players. Westbrook is not that. So anything he does until April, I'm not going to be super excited over the moon about it. He could win Sixth Man of the Year. Potentially, I would cast a fake ballot for him for Sixth Man of the Year, right? But that is irrelevant. Is he going to help in the playoffs? And the last 10 years say no.
It's been short stint after short stint for Russell Westbrook since Oklahoma City for a reason, right? He is kind of tough to build around, tough to kind of get along with. He kind of wears out his welcome in multiple locker rooms. And you're right, like these last two off seasons for the Nuggets, they've basically gone from Bruce Brown, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and these guys to Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric, who can't keep a job in any one place for more than a season and a half, it seems like. And so You're absolutely right in terms of
when you load up ESPN, it shouldn't say Nuggets depth chart. It should say Nuggets shallow chart. That's what I'm saying.
Shallow chart. It reminds me a little bit of what Sam Presti did early with the Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Serge Ibaka Thunder. They go to the 2012 finals, but he's so just like, no, we're going to build through youth, through the draft, the back end of the roster, and they never made it back to the finals. You're kind of seeing that now with Calvin Booth and the Nuggets and saying like, look, we're going to build, we're going to be the Spurs instead of winning multiple championships in a row or whatever. It's like, well, mission accomplished. You didn't win you didn't win 2 in a row. Like, I guess everything's going to plan for Denver.
Right.
So you need to learn to have those playoff rotation caliber guys. Maybe this like signing Saric and Westbrook was sort of learning from that 1-year mistake. But again, like it might be too late because you let those guys walk and then you let KCP walk this offseason. So
I thought all their talk about, we're trying to build for the long term. We want to be a dynasty, not chase 2 titles. I thought it was all to cover up for ownership's unwillingness to spend. I thought it was all just,
it was loser talk. Yeah.
And this idea of like, we're going to be like the Spurs. When did Duncan start winning titles? Awful lot earlier in his career than Jokic. Yeah. No knock to Jokic because people understand I have Duncan very, 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 very high. I mean, just off of Mount Rushmore all time in terms of great players, right? So it's an unfair standard for anybody. But you can have that kind of self-sustaining dynasty when you have all those guys who are built in from their early 20s. The only guy that Jokic has really had as a long-term running mate at this point has been Murray. Murray was horrible in Paris. Yep. Horrible, period.
And bad in the playoffs.
And bad in the playoffs. And you got to wonder how much of it was, other than the Lakers series, by the way. I mean, come on. Right. The Lakers fans are like.
2 good games in the Lakers series, yeah.
That was the funniest thing, Wes. Like the Lakers fans, when he's getting the ball, the game on the line, are terrified. No, not Jamal Murray. No, not Jamal Murray. When they were going against France in Paris, and it's Canada, France, and it's going to be this big upset for the French. Every time the ball would go to Murray, the crowd would be like, yeah, shoot it, do whatever you want, we don't care. Like within like a 2-month time period, that's how quickly it flipped. It was pretty wild. So that's why it's got to be something health related, right? Yeah. But Jokic just needs real help. He doesn't have it. They cannot pretend that they're going to have some 10-year-long dynasty if this version of Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon are his Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili. Give me a break, man. Come on. And so just stop selling it to us. Nuggets front office, just be honest. Keep it real. You went cheap. It's okay. Just admit that. And I'm also sick, by the way, this is just getting into rant territory.
Yeah, it is. That's good. Let's go.
How many times have we heard, we made the same offer. They just chose to go a different direction.
Yeah.
Like we heard it with Jeremy Grant. We heard it with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Oh, yeah, I'm sure it was the same offer. I'm sure it was down to the penny, and they just decided, okay, I'm going to go to a team that hasn't been relevant in 10 years in the Orlando Magic.
I definitely want to go to Detroit instead. I definitely want to go to Orlando instead of where I want a championship. No, it's ridiculous.
Stop lying. That's all we're asking for, please.
Good rant. Well placed. Love it. Nothing to add there. I want to do these 3 quickly, and then we'll end with DeMar DeRozan. So Chris Paul, San Antonio Spurs. This one goes without saying, but he just has to be on a list of identity changers. Maybe the biggest identity changer of his generation. Like every team Chris Paul plays for looks like a Chris Paul team for the most part. Every team, but heavy pick and roll, efficient offense, low in turnovers. Chris Paul snaking the thing, going to the mid-range shot, getting others involved. He's going to get Wembanyama easier touches. He's also going to lessen the ball handling responsibilities on Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson. Thank goodness for the Spurs and some of the other guys on that roster. Anything to add on Chris Paul before we move on?
I've been very low on the supporting cast Spurs during Wembanyama's rookie year. I wanted this move to happen last year. I'm glad it's happening this year. It's funny because with that French team in the Olympics, we finally got to see Wemby play with a good guard. They pulled this guy Cordonnier or whatever his name was out of nowhere, and he had like 3 good games, and they almost beat the freaking dream team, right? So it's like Wemby does not need that much help. I think that Chris Paul is going to be able to provide a little something. Now, he's clearly not who he was a couple years ago. I didn't think the Golden State stint was all that impressive, but this is an upgrade for sure, and it's going to really help him continue to develop as a professional as well. I think the Spurs are going to make the play-in tournament. I'm in. Like I'm in. Like why? Why not? I mean,
who's the other guy that you like? You said you were already low on the Spurs supporting cast. Is there a guy or 2 that you do like in the supporting cast? I'm a Vassell guy.
Yeah, I like Victor Wembanyama. I like Wemby. I like number 1. I like the alien. No, it's just all on him. It's sort of like Caitlin Clark and the Fever. You could overanalyze stuff, But if you just have a phenomenon, you're going to win some games. And I think that's where he's at. I think he's ready for a big year 2 jump. I think they just had the restrictor plates on him, the training wheels on him all of last year. And I think that's going to come off quite a bit this season. And, Vassell is fine to me. Like, I think he's a really quality scoring guard. I love that you're going to take the ball out of his hands more, like you mentioned earlier. KJ could play. Like, they have a couple of guys who can help here and there. Less Sohan is more, in my opinion. And it seems like the way they've kind of constructed this thing, they're going to be a little bit less interested in trying to just turn their whole team over to him, which was super weird. So this is all based on Wembanyama optimism. Which
was super weird. Understatement of the year, maybe. That was
so strange. Like,
that was the strangest thing.
Yeah, well, they knew what they were doing.
I'm all for experimentation, but
they're trying to get ready for another pick, right? And so they got Castle, who I don't know if I expect a ton from his rookie year, but an interesting player to watch develop. But this is really about just Wemby, kind of doing what LeBron did, right? It's like you get your feet wet, you come back, and it's like, hey, guess what? I might just be like 20 years old, but I own the league now, so good luck with it. And if it doesn't happen this year, I'm just going to be early because it's going to happen next year.
I kind of like Castle as a rookie of the year long shot pick. Like if you're going to sprinkle some cash on it, because if you're right and the Spurs are in the play-in mix, their eyes are going to be on them. I like Castle having the ball in his hands, learning a little bit from Chris Paul. Like as the season goes on, he can have a strong finish, win some voters. Spurs are in the playoff chase. So kind of like that as a long shot pick. Couple more centers, and then we'll end with our last player here. I've got Khalil Ware and I've got Isaiah Hartenstein, both on my list here of identity changers. Khalil Ware, start with him. Heat get a 7-foot shot blocker, kind of guy they haven't had since Hassan Whiteside. I think they're going to experiment with lineups where Ware plays with Bam Adebayo. That's obviously a very different look than they've had in the past. So that's an identity changer. Isaiah Hartenstein, kind of ditto, playing with Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren. Supersized lineup, Twin Towers, whatever we want to call it. That's great for matching up against the Nuggets and the Timberwolves. Gives the Thunder sort of a force on the boards that they haven't had. Thunder were 28th in rebounding rate last year. The Knicks were first, not all because of Hartenstein, but obviously he was a big part of that. So just two teams that now can turn the key on a Twin Towers lineup that they didn't otherwise have.
No, it's an interesting parallel to draw because we have seen teams need to go bigger, right? Like Boston was pretty big at times during the playoffs, and Dallas, like they did pretty well matching up size-wise thanks to Lively and Gafford. I mean, what was their moves last year? It was all about let's get bigger, let's get bigger. So I think if you're the Heat, like the dream scenario for the Heat is that Ware winds up being there Lively. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Yep, that's the comparison they keep talking about.
Yeah, well, so there we go. Everybody's on the same page. In terms of Oklahoma City, I was wondering, like, would the number one identity changer from last year have been Chet? Because, he was injured the previous year. He comes back. Their defense is insane. They go skyrocketing up the standings. And, like, it was mostly because of him. They didn't really have anybody besides him. What we saw, though, was Oklahoma City was too small inside, right? They were getting pounded. Chet needed some fortification. Now, they could play the two bigs that you're describing in some of these playoff matchups, or they could just stay stretched, which they really want to do. And the main reason why they want to stay stretched so much is because Shea gets to the free throw line and gets to the rim, right? So you could do that with Chet because he's the floor spacer as well, but you could also just play Hartenstein at center and have 4 out around him, right? And then now he's just the dive guy. He's more physical to match up with whether it's Joker or whoever else it might be. And, you could kind of stagger him and Chet as well. So I just think that their overall looks are better this year than last year. I don't want to give it away. I'm flirting hard with OKC win the championship this year. What do you think?
I'm right there with you, man. I think what we've learned over these last couple of years is you need more weapons, like real versatility. And I think versatility, it's like one of those terms in the NBA that we use way too much. And it's actually weirdly become a wrong sort of synonym for just being small. Like every team that's small says we're versatile. No, you're just small, right? That's right. It. And so adding that size as these teams have is just more tools in the toolbox, more items on the menu, all these kinds of things. And I think if you're the Thunder, you need it. And paying him $30 million a year might be pricey for just another tool in the toolbox, but they have the money for all these salary cap reasons. It works. Like he comes off the books potentially when all these other extensions kick in and et cetera. But I love it for them. They went out and just got he's going to be way overpaid probably for his job, but that's fine. Go win the championship. Like that's what we're talking about. Like if you got a window open, go for it. I'm with you.
Not necessarily done, by the way.
Right. Exactly.
He still has a million draft picks and all these other things that he could, if they're the number one seed, let's say they have like a 3-game cushion, at the trade deadline, he could invest more to plug another hole, to add a little depth, to do whatever else it would take to tweak the lineup. So I just love the spot that Oklahoma City is in competitively. Could I flip it for you real quick, though?
Yeah.
What do you think about the identity change for the Knicks, who are sort of going the other direction from what you're describing? They're taking Hartenstein out, and you were like, well, their rebounding rate wasn't just because of Hartenstein. Well, against the Sixers in the playoffs, it kind of felt like it was just because of him. He was getting every single rebound. He's like diving sideways, doing all the Dennis Rodman stuff, hitting the deck. So he was big for them in that series, right? And now it's a Mitchell Robinson deal. It's a Julius Randle deal. But they do add Mikal Bridges, who, your point is well taken about sometimes versatility is just small. But that's not the case with Bridges. Like Bridges and OG Anunoby, those two guys are big, long, I wouldn't say physical wings in Bridges' case, but in OG's case, he's physical. That's real versatility around Brunson. So what do you think about their identity changing? Because I would almost argue the Knicks, by virtue of this calculation of betting on Bridges, one of the biggest identity change teams of the whole summer.
Interesting. I thought about them with obviously the Bridges swap for Hartenstein, but I just think a Tom Thibodeau team is always going to play like a Tom Thibodeau team. So I when I think of identity, I was like, yeah, it's still going to feel like a Jalen Brunson, right, Tom Thibodeau, Josh Hart slamming his head against the backboard kind of team. But it's in terms of like the schematic stuff, yeah, I think they are going to be a little bit more versatile, more switch heavy, smaller kind of thing. It will be a little bit of an identity change. More threes. Well, hopefully more threes. Yeah. So yeah, I could see it. I'm in.
Well, I mean, you're going to have a lot of lineups where it's like you could play Randall at the 5, Bridges, OG, Hart, Brunson. You're putting up a ton.
No, they're going to, because if they're hoping Mitchell Robinson's going to be healthy the whole season, I got news for them. Right. So they're going to be ending. Yeah.
100%. So I mean, by default, you're jacking a ton of threes with that lineup, right? And you have a couple other guys you could kind of plug in and out who, they have been kind of collecting those auxiliary shooters. I actually think that Bridges to the Knicks changes the Knicks identity more than Paul George to the Sixers, because I think when you have Embiid, it's just you are an Embiid team, right? And you are going to be a maxi team. We saw what that looked like last year. He has a lot of gifts as a guard, but I think he just kind of is who he is, right? And I think those are going to be their two main players. George might be more talented, you could argue, than one of those guys. I don't know. But I think he's going to wind up slotting in as the number 3 guy just because the other guys were the incumbents. And so I think it's going to look better because George is better than Tobias Harris. But I don't think it's going to be like this big sea change type deal. I do think the Knicks have a chance to look
I don't have them on the list.
Different.
Yeah, no, that's all fair. Like the Knicks now match up almost position for position with the Celtics. I have my own gripes about that. I don't think that's necessarily the way to beat the Celtics. I actually think the way to beat the Celtics is more of what Philadelphia is doing, where you just try to like beat them with a different style of game. But they are going to look different. Last one here. DeMar DeRozan, Sacramento Kings. This might I was really lukewarm on this when it first happened, Ben. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've liked this, and the more I'm excited to watch Sacramento the first week. Okay.
I think I'm still lukewarm. Maybe my microwave's not voltage. It's a little off right now. Help me out.
Well, first of all, I'm a DeMar DeRozan fan. I love watching him. He's like a dinosaur in 2024. It's just like, all right, I can kind of go through League Pass. I'm like, well, this is kind of different than what I'm watching everywhere else. So I kind of like that. But look, the Kings, since trading for Sabonis and pairing him with De'Aaron Fox, they've kind of been like your friend's mom, where you would go over their house as a kid and like every single night she was making stir fry, and you're like, all right, I know what to expect. It's stir fry every night. And eventually you just start bringing your own chopsticks over. No kid does this, but just stick with me on the metaphor.
I'm with you. I got it.
You bring your chopsticks because you're prepared for the stir fry, and then one day she just breaks out tacos and you're like, well, I can't eat these with chopsticks. That's sort of what I think DeMar DeRozan is for the Sacramento. He's the tacos, where every defense is like, I know what to expect. It's Sabonis Fox 2-man game. I'm going into these games. It's been 2 years of this. I know how to take it away. And Mike Brown, for his credit, tried throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall last year, and it never really seemed to stick in terms of like another option, another item on the menu. And DeMar DeRozan is the tacos. He's the other item on the menu. He's like that new thing where now defenses are going to have to, account for that. I don't know if it makes them like meaningfully better. That's not what I care about. I'm not a Kings fan. I just know that it makes me more excited to watch them, and that's really what I care about. I think it's nice. I think it's sort of like, let's just be good offensively. Let's just have all these different things that you have to worry about offensively. And maybe Mike Brown, it's maybe a little bit similar to Phoenix, even though they have more weapons defensively. Not that many more, but more. Maybe they could just be good enough defensively, and Mike Brown can coach him up there. But I kind of like it the more I think about it.
Look, I think it's a worthwhile gamble. I mean, it was time to shake it up. You didn't really lose anything major from this situation. You've tried a few other things around the edges, and they just never really panned out. And so you're kind of getting to the point where, like, we have to take a swing to meaningfully jump. And you're Sacramento. How are you ever going to convince anybody to go there, right? So it's pretty tricky. What I'm worried about is a couple things. First of all, the conventional wisdom is DeMar's going to crush your spacing. He's going to stop the ball. He's going to need the ball, right? I think that his addition could come at Fox's expense because Fox, much like I was saying with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander earlier, the more you're spreading out, the more effective he's going to be because he's going downhill, he's operating in space and so forth. A crunch court is probably going to bring down his efficiency. And when you pair DeRozan with Sabonis, that's basically two non-shooters, right?
Right.
And so now it's going to start to get really tight. And Sacramento's efficiency really slipped hard from 2 years ago to last year. And I'm worried, are they going to be more like last year's version rather than like catapulting back up to the previous version? What I wanted to see was their rookie, or I guess now going into his third year, Keegan Murray, take the jump, right? The year 1 to year 2 jump. I thought that was how their offense was going to stay elite. And that didn't really happen, right? So if that could happen this year, maybe that offsets a little bit of what you're bringing to the table with DeRozan. But I think there's a chance that even though they have more talent, it's still clunky because what do we see constantly from Chicago's offense? You have all these names on the court, but it was clunky the whole time.
Right.
And, DeRozan was the most talented guy from that group. So he winds up looking the best, getting the best numbers. But his success kind of came at the expense of the team's success. And I'm not blaming him for that. It's just that's what it's like when you're the dinosaur type player that you were describing. My other concern is like Fox is pretty money in the clutch, right? DeRozan's pretty money in the clutch. It could be awesome. And like everybody's money and they just win every close game. And that's how they shoot up the standings. Or it could be a my turn, your turn. I don't want to step on toes. I want to defer to the older guy. They're going to have to kind of figure that out. Right. And again, when you're taking spacing out of the equation, that could become trickier. So those are my concerns for Sacramento. But I think they're a team you're really going to want to watch them early in the season on League Pass and try to avoid overreacting. Right. Because it could look bad for the first couple weeks and then maybe they figure it out, right? So you want to watch that progression, I think, if you're a diehard fan and just see how does this acclimation work.
Yeah, I think it changes a lot about what they are. It puts a lot on De'Aaron Fox to grow as a decision maker because in those clutch situations that you were talking about, the ball's probably going to mostly be in it like 90% of the time. The possession will start in De'Aaron Fox's hands. It's going to be on him to decide, do I want to take the shot or do I want to give it to DeRozan? And that could look clunky. That could look my turn, your turn. But I think if Fox has room to grow, that's probably the main place as just a real point guard decision maker. He's going to have to figure that out. He's going to have to say like, oh, it's my team. I know that you've got all these clutch time heroics in Chicago and San Antonio and Toronto. That's not going to be the case here. It's my team. It's my ball. But if you're open, I'll give it to you. And I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see how he responds to that. But I'm excited to watch it either way.
Well, the other key is we didn't see a ton of West buyers, right? And so in one scenario, it's like they're kind of cutting against the grain by adding an impact player. So if everybody else is slipping back a little bit, that's the argument to be a buyer and hope that it works out in your favor. Golden State felt like they tread water, Lakers tread water, Clippers lose Paul George. There's an opportunity to make a move. And that's what they were also sensing. And I think that's another reason to justify that decision by Sacramento. Not only are you just trying to spark things up, the timing to do so was pretty good.
Tell me the best thing you ate in France, and then we'll go.
I'm the wrong guy to ask, man. To be honest, it's embarrassing the stuff that I was eating, like Thai takeout every single night off Uber Eats, like $5 pizza in the hotel room, like 1 o'clock in the morning after the games. I mean, people are going to say the croissants and there's a lot of Nutella involved with the breakfast buffets at the hotels. So I got some, more than my fair share of Nutella. The best food I probably had, though, was actually not in France. It was across the border in I take it back. No, it was in France. It was in northern France in Lille where they held the opening round. And it was the world champion French fries. This little fry guy had just random local shop, had sort of perfected the art of the French fry. And they're big on fries in northern France and Belgium. They're obsessed with them, right? It's like the local thing. There's fry shops everywhere. And this guy had won the contest. There was a line out the door.
Like shoestring, curly, waffle, ridges? What are we talking?
No gimmicks. I mean, these are just straight fries. And the way I would describe him is he kind of like broke the algorithm, right? So he tried to make the most average fry so he wouldn't offend the judges in the competition, right? So it's salty, but not too salty, right? It's thick, but it's not too thick. It's brown, but it's not too brown. It's crispy, but it's not too crispy. Like he just kind of like went straight down the middle,
Right.
and just a very satisfying fry. And the large fry that they sold me, it would be like going to a baseball stadium where they put like all the nachos into a helmet. It was like that size of fries, right? And you could just eat them and eat them and eat them, and you wouldn't get sick of them because they were that good. So shout out, I think it was like Friederie Mesri in Lille, France. Line out the door. You could tell people were doing it for the gram with the pictures by the sign, and like they were only open certain hours because they were so popular. They didn't have to be open all day. I mean, it was like a real thing. So
Did you use a dip?
What's that?
Any dip? Mustard, ketchup? Nothing.
I raw dogged it. No, but they did have like 5 or 6 different dips. But I was trying to like really taste test it
Yeah,
to say,
pure,
like,
pure fry experience.
Is this better than McDonald's? Really? Right? Like,
And?
is this, So I went plain, and I don't regret it. It was great.
I don't regret having you on for my first episode, Ben. It was a joy to talk with basketball with you. Been too long since we've spoke, but Ben Golliver, Washington Post, the GOAT podcast. I'll plug it all in the post show notes and all those stuff. Ben, thanks so much, man.
My pleasure. Congrats on the show, man. We'll talk soon.